So Doctor Strange is the 14th movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is crazy that we're on the 14th movie in the series. And I am glad to say they are still going strong, and they're going just as strong as ever. This movie is very enjoyable. It's very fun. And I went into this, I've never read a Doctor Strange comic book. I've never watched this Doctor Strange cartoon. I know almost nothing about Doctor Strange other than a basic synopsis of who the character is. So I went as the guy that was like, really? They're making a movie out of this? Okay, Inception graphics, that's pretty cool. I like Cumberbatch, but I don't know what to expect from this because this is not my thing at all, and I really enjoyed this movie. My wife did not want to go to the movie with me. She's like, I don't want to see this in the theater. This is not my thing. I don't know anything about it. And she left, and the word spectacular was used to describe the movie. So let's set up where we're going with this. So Doctor Strange is the story of a brilliant but arrogant surgeon who loses the ability to use his hands, so he seeks out any way possible to heal himself, and in doing so discovers a magic world, and our story unfolds as he starts to begin to study the magical arts. What makes the Marvel Cinematic Universe so great is they've discovered how to package almost any story in a way that is enjoyable for almost anyone. These are very fun movies, they're very enjoyable movies, and they find a way to make each and every one of them unique. So this one, obviously, just from the trailers, you can look at it and go, that's different. It looks different from everything else because all these magic, trippy imagery type stuff, it looks different while still feeling very much in the style of what they've been doing all along and just as fun and enjoyable as all of these movies have all been. That's really the gift that they have. So let's talk about the good in this movie. First off, it just moves really fast. That's really stuck out to me is the movie ended and I was like, really? It's already over? And then I thought through it and I was like, yeah, there was a lot of stuff in there and it's almost 2 hours long, but it just moved so fast and had an urgency to it. Because that was kind of my fear with it is like, okay, are we going to dwindle too long with him before everything that begins? Are we going to dwindle too long with him training? Are we going to get bogged down and him going back to normal life? And the whole movie just moves really fast and it doesn't have any of the things I was afraid of it having. Instead, it just very much feels like we really get to know him really quickly, and then we see the struggle after he loses the ability to use his hands, and we see him on this journey, and it all just moves fast. It has a constant feeling of he's trying to overcome something. We never get into like this area where we just feel like we're relaxing for any point in time. It just feels constantly moving in a good way. The second thing that's great about this movie is the cast. Obviously, Chiwetel Ejiofor is going to be brilliant. Obviously, Tilda Swinton is going to do a great job. Obviously, Benedict Cumberbatch is wonderful as this arrogant guy that you really hate by about 15 minutes into this movie, and you still love him at the same time. That he just pulls off this arrogance, this just absolute jerk while having a charm to him and a warmth to him at the same time. And so obviously they're going to do a great job, but even the smaller roles in it, like Rachel McAdams doesn't really have a big part in the movie. She's really just there to help us understand the Stephen Strange character at different phases in his life and kind of be the perspective of a normal person observing him, whether in his arrogant form, in his broken form, in his magic form. What's that perspective of the normal person? She doesn't have a lot of screen time, but she brings a presence to the screen and a likability, as well as, like I said, just kind of this, what would, like the person that's watching all this going like, what's going on? Or this person watching the arrogant version of him that's just like disgusted by his behavior while caring for him at the same time. Each of these roles along the way that's cast very well. Even like Benjamin Bratt is in so little of the movie, but they cast someone really well for a role that needs to pop while being very small as a part of the movie. And so I think the cast in this was great. The third thing that makes this a must-see are the visuals. Just if you've seen any of the trailers, you know this is a movie that puts its budget up on the screen and you're seeing creative visuals, not just a bunch of CGI nonsense, but things that are interesting and unique that you've never seen before in a movie. And they're used in a way that's interesting. They're running on the sides of walls. They're running through portals and gaps and the world folds in. And all of that kind of plays into the actual like fighting style of these sorcerers, which makes it so interesting. And this is a truly cinematic experience. I believe if you see it on a small screen, you'll lose something. You're not going to get as much out of it if you don't see it on a big, gigantic screen. I didn't see it in 3D. If you like 3D, this seems like the type of movie that absolutely you will get something out of it by seeing it in 3D, because the visuals are such a key element to what they're doing and what makes the movie so cool. And there's the mirror realm, and there's all these different things to where 3D could actually bring something to the plate. At the same time, if you're not a big person into 3D and you go to see this in 3D, you might get like motion sickness. Like, we were 2 minutes into this movie and I seeing it in 2D and I was like, oh, I feel a little bit sick right now because the images are so crazy and they're so cool. But this really is the type of movie you need to see on the big screen. Like, I reviewed The Accountant about 3 weeks ago, loved the movie. If you saw that at home, you wouldn't lose anything. This movie, go see it on a big screen, go see it on a really big screen because it's worth it. So what makes the visuals so cool is that they use them differently at different times in the movie, and there's a variety of them. So I went into it afraid a little bit that we're going to just see like 30 minutes of Inception buildings like folding in and the world warping. It's not like that. You get that, you get a lot of that, and you enjoy that, and then the next scene will be something different where they're using the magic in a different way. And especially like going into the third act, I was like, all right, we've already seen the buildings, we've already seen, the folding in on itself. Where are we going next? And then they had another thing that they did. And so there's a lot of different types of trippy images and visuals, and all used very differently and in very cool ways. Finally, the thing that makes this movie really work is Stephen Strange's story arc throughout the movie and just watching him develop. And that's at the core of what this story is all about. It is an origin story, and therefore the main story we're watching is really his character development as he goes from one thing to something different at the very end of the movie, as his values change, as his desires change. And they put a series of characters in this that we get to bounce off of, where we see different ideologies, different ways of thinking, which make like Chiwetel Ejiofor's characters very interesting in his relationship and his interactions with Stephen Strange, in his actions with the Ancient One. Like, all these different characters bring something different to this realm, and how each of them has different values and the way they see things, and all of it matters in the way the story plays out. And so even the nature of their relationship starts at one place and it ends somewhere else, and it makes for a very interesting dynamic in all of this. Now, on the negative side, the only thing that I think that sometimes really didn't work quite right was some of the humor. And it felt a little bit out of tone with the rest of the movie a little bit, when there's a few slapsticky type jokes in there that just felt like they belonged in a different movie. And then some of the witty dialogue from Stephen Strange, if it's meant to be like awkward interaction humor, it kind of works and it's kind of amusing. If it's meant to be like Tony Stark one-liners, it doesn't work. And it's the way it plays in the movie is a little bit unclear. Like, my theater was not laughing at a few of the moments where it felt like there was supposed to be a joke there. And so some of that didn't work. Beyond that, I don't really have criticism so much as there's some things that are weaknesses. And they're some of the typical complaints about Marvel movies, specifically the main villain, the third act conflict, and the story structure is a bit formulaic. So the movie follows a very typical Marvel origin story template. At the beginning of the movie, we see our character before their wacky adventure begins. Something happens. Then there's a course where they get prepared for their time to be the superhero. Somewhere in the midst of this, there's little hints of what our third act conflict will be. There's some act where the action starts to begin, and then we get our big third act with lots of special effects and cool visuals. That's kind of how this movie plays out. The main conflict of the third act is introduced kind of at the beginning of the movie, but really it doesn't get going until about halfway through the movie. And once it gets going, it's just kind of non-stop action, non-stop crazy visuals. So like so many Marvel movies, the main character's big story arc is very cinematic and very intriguing. However, the main villain's story arc and conflict there feels very much episode of the week. It kind of comes fairly late in the movie. Like, it's sprinkled in early on, but the actual conflict that's introduced in the first act all ties back to our main character and the journey he needs to go on. It does not tie back to our main conflict of the third act. The conflict of the third act resolves the character arc of our main character, or Stephen Strange. What it doesn't do is really tie back to first act issues. And so in that sense, that's kind of this origin story template that Marvel movies use. That's really where this fault, where people say they have weak villains, and they do, but it's because the way villains are used, they're used as a plot device, and that plot device is really started to be put into use about halfway through the movie, and that's the case here as well. Overall, this is a very fun movie. I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. It has very strong acting. It has incredible visuals. The story arc of our main character and the people he interacts with is very intriguing. However, the main plot involving the conflict going into the third act is less intriguing, but this is a fun movie that's very entertaining and very enjoyable, even if you know absolutely nothing about Doctor Strange going into it. And if I'm being honest, this is the type of movie that moves so fast that I was thinking, man, I could have used 10 more minutes of this, 10 more minutes of this. This could have gone on longer, but I was very satisfied with the movie they gave me. And at the same time, I'm thinking, I don't know if I would want them to put all that stuff in that I'd be interested in seeing, because it would kill the very swift, urgent pacing of the movie. And so they put together a very fun, exciting package. I really enjoyed this movie. It's probably in my top third favorite of Marvel movies at this point in time. So that's what I have to say about Doctor Strange. What about you? Where do you rank it amongst the solo Marvel films? Where is it in there for you? Because I don't want to just talk about movies. I want to talk about movies with you. So comment below. Let's have a great conversation. If you're new to my channel, you've never clicked that subscribe button, please consider clicking that subscribe button so my videos just show up in your feed. And thank you for watching.